Welcome to Guided Spirit Conversations. I'm your host, Marla Goldberg. This podcast has been created with you in mind to acquaint you with some of the most incredible metaphysicians and spiritual leaders from around the globe who have helped others change their lives. In this interactive hour, you will be offered insights and techniques to help you make a difference in your life. Don't forget to subscribe to the show in your favorite listening platform. And here we go, on to the show. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. How are you doing? I'm Marla Goldberg, and I'm so excited to have you with me today. So before I start my introductions, I do want to wish whatever your observance is, whether it's Passover, Easter, Ramadan, a very happy and joyful holiday with whatever you observe. And if you don't observe, I hope you have a great weekend while everyone else is celebrating their holidays. Okay, well, today I have a very special guest. This is a very unique conversation. If you follow the show, this is Salicrow, who I'm going to introduce you to, is a first, and I'm really excited to have her with us. So Salicrow is a natural psychic medium who weaves the traditions of her Irish traveler and Blackfoot heritage with modern magical techniques. For more than 30 years, she has worked as a spirit channel, seer, intuitive healer, offering readings and teaching workshops throughout the United States and internationally. She is the author of 3 books. 2 of them have been released. 1 of them will be released next month. And the books are called Jump Girl, The Path of Elemental Witchcraft, and The Spirit Speaker. So let's welcome Salicrow. Hi, Sally.
Hi, Marla. Thank you for having me. I will just correct one thing. Spirit Speaker came out on Tuesday.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I just want people to know that they can get it at any major bookseller and probably some of the smaller ones.
Nice. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
I have my book and I'm writing another, and I know it's a labor of love, but it's a lot of work. People don't really realize how much you invest in your writing.
How emotional it can be.
Oh, absolutely, without question. So I want to start at the beginning. You say you're a natural psychic medium. You were born with your abilities intact, but when was the first age that you realized that you were unique in your gift, that not everybody is able to do what able to do?
That's a good question. So I grew up in a family where my great grandmother was my first teacher. So that my father was raised by his grandmother. I'll refer to her as Grammy Brown. She's written about in most of my books. And she was part Irish traveler and part Blackfoot. Her parents were both gifted in their abilities. And so she was the recipient of both of those lines, if you will, and started teaching me and my sister Sandy when we were really little. So my first experience with spirit happened when I was 3 months old. I don't remember it, but my grandmother witnessed me at a funeral with my father's mother who had passed. And she saw that my grandmother was playing with me and that I was responding. I was having experiences with spirit and psychic divination by the time I was 3 or 4 years old, but I didn't have those words for it. My grandmother just would say things to me like, spirits talk to you, Sally, it's okay. Or you just know things sometimes, it's okay. And so it was done in such a way that it was like saying you have brown hair and blue eyes, that it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't until I was in school that I started realizing that everybody didn't perceive in the same way, because, teachers would start talking about imaginary friends. And I just assumed that she was talking to everybody else because I knew that mine weren't imaginary because my grandmother saw them, my sister saw them. So I grew up with, in my opinion, like on top of having natural gifts, the real most important gift I was given was understanding, was somebody else thinking it was normal, that if I saw something and pointed it out, my sister who was with me most of the time could also see it and could describe it. So for us, it was, we've been like, we tell people we were meant to be twins. And having that and my grandmother were really the gifts. And that's why I call myself natural, because this is a natural part of my life. I don't remember not being psychic.
I think it's wonderful that you have that support. And my wish for people who have children who talk in the way that you were talking, that the parents wouldn't say, oh no, that's your imagination, and repress
Right,
them, but to honor it and just, even if they don't believe in it, go along with it to support the child and their experience.
right.
And it sounds like you
Or
so
yeah,
had that.
some people are scared when their child has those experiences, and creates fear around it for their children, because I have been teaching for the last 20 years. And during that time, most of the people who show up to my classes are people who have natural abilities, who did not have the same upbringing as me. And they had either, like you said, somebody told them that it wasn't real, or that it was evil, and that they were, plagued by demons, or who else knows what else they had to deal with, especially if they came from a really strict religious background.
Yeah, I just can't think of anything better you can do for a child than to support them. And,
Yes.
in whatever endeavor, whatever they're talking about, whether you believe it or not, this don't take the reality of your child away from them.
And we never know what they're actually growing up to be, because one of the things I bring up a lot is that my report cards always said, Sally is a good student, but she's far too social. And so my joke is they had no idea what I was training to be. My job is all about communication.
Absolutely. And it's so powerful. And then when did you start transitioning into um, some of you're a druid, you became a druid, you're a white, well, you call yourself a green witch, so it would be on the white side, opposed to, which
Mhm.
is white magic, which is supportive and loving and honoring, where black magic would be more of, negative spells and connotations, things like that.
Right.
Am I correct in the
Yeah.
definition?
When people think of it, like when they think of somebody who practices black magic, it's harmful and baneful to other people. I don't do any of that. I have a career as a psychic medium and healer. I, becoming an author is secondary. So in answering your question, I started reading cards for the public when I was 18. I'm now 52. So I didn't even really think about it, it was just something that happened. I was doing other things, but I could read cards, and I could make some money off of it, and it was a no-brainer. And then that was the part in my life that just kept growing and growing and growing. I started practicing, um, I had an introduction to Wicca when I was 23. I do not consider myself Wiccan. I think that's, again, a little too religious and dogmatic for me. I consider myself a modern folk magic practitioner, which means practical, simple magic. I specialize in divination, communication, healing, and geomancy. And that's what I have on most of my literature that I put out to people. Those are the things, and they're all about under the umbrella of being a healer. So I don't do spirit communication for entertainment. You'll never find me doing a haunted house tour. I work primarily with families, and often have people who, one person in the family will come to see me, and because I let them record me for free, they can just bring it and share with whatever family members they want. That helps family members who are really mourning to be able to listen to that quietly by themselves somewhere. And then usually those people come back too. So everything I've done is grown through word of mouth, because I am a healer. I work on healing my community, in any way that I can.
And that's what you call yourself. You use your psychic mediumship to heal. So
Mhm.
let people understand what the difference is. And hi, Sean, what the difference is in the way you present yourself as a healer and how you use your tools for that.
So as a healer, I mean, I have my Reiki masters in 6 schools of Reiki. So I studied Reiki for about 10 years, where that was my deep dive of study. I also am a sound healing practitioner in my voice, something I've done for over 20 years. So I actually sing to people when they're on the table, or if I'm doing a distance appointment, I'm sending them Reiki, but I'm also singing to them. And it's like an elongation of vowel sounds. So it's more like thinking singing bowls. I make some weird noises from my voice. Um, but I call myself an intuitive healer because I'm a good healer because I'm a good psychic. So while my specialties that I work with in healing are trauma, PTSD, sexual trauma, and addiction, because, and I say those are my specialties because, like, if you broke your leg, you could come to see me and I could work on you and help you. But I think there are better people out there for doing physical healing issues. I am a good healer because I can journey with the person when I'm working on them. I can listen to their guides. I know what's really causing the problem, and then I can guide people through that process. Um, so I don't even really advertise the healing part of my business. My healing clients are people who've come to me for readings, and yeah, that's really where that comes from. Everybody who has a healing session with me has to have a consultation anyway, so they've started with a psychic session.
which I think is so great. And you can't have enough healing. I mean, we bring a lot of past life stuff into our plan, along with the stuff we get to accumulate from, making decisions that
Yeah,
don't serve us. And so it can keep you really busy because there's
they
so much
certainly
going
can.
on. Yeah, because you've got layer upon layer upon layer. Now you also work as a medium, but you talk about honoring the beloved dead.
Yes.
So is that part of, like, do you teach your clients how to honor the beloved dead when they're on your table and how to do it when they get off the table, how they live their life, or is this a different pathway?
So people can have different appointments with me. Some people literally come for a psychic divination, where they got stuff going on in their life, and I literally sit down. I use runes and tarot. I don't need any tools. I just like them, but I'll sit and I'll talk to people about their life, what's happening, what they can do to avoid certain situations or to, enhance certain situations. People also come to me for past life readings. They come to me for spirit communication, either individually or in groups. And then I do healing. So these are all separate services. And most people who come to me for spirit communication, they are coming, the majority of my clients are one-on-one. That's how they prefer it, sometimes groups. And they're with me for usually a half an hour to an hour. I ask them if there's anybody in particular they are looking for to make best use of our time. And then I open up my session always by creating sacred space, inviting my guide, and then inviting their loved ones to join us, their beloved dead, which are family, friends, loved ones, and ancestors. So I'm not the let's take care of this haunted house. I mean, I've done that for people, but the majority of my work is more in helping people who are in mourning to make contact with their loved ones in spirit. And I do teach those people how to create family altars, how to do little offerings in order to have a living relationship with their beloved dead. And that is where Spirit Speaker came out of.
I like that you call them beloved dead, because, and I was having this conversation a couple of days ago with someone about people who transition after just having a fight with somebody. So
Yeah.
the ones that are left behind are left with so much guilt and angst over the argument, or
Mhm.
that they didn't say the "I love you," or they said cruel words. And so I'm taking from this conversation that you can connect with the other side, the beloved dead, to sort of iron this
Yeah.
out and take the guilt away from the
Sometimes
issues as
it's
well.
just that they miss them. I will find that, like, people who've lost a spouse might actually come and have appointments to ask questions about things that are going on with raising their kids or with, life events. Um, People who do have unfinished business do want to come and be able to make that connection. And I actually have people who come who had unfinished business and are really mad at somebody who's died and want to come and try to work through that. When that started happening to me when I was young, I had to start putting some parameters in. I had to do this just the other day to someone. I had to say, like, look, I understand that this is really emotional, but you're directing your energy at me, and I am just here as the person who's sharing information. So we have to tone it down a little bit because, when you're the person who's sharing the response or what the spirit is saying, it can become really emotional. So, like, I've learned a lot. I do a lot of counseling, and I see counselors as clients. And in my local area, I've not only worked in a counseling building before because they asked me to, but I have tons of people who come to me because their counselors have sent them to me.
And basically, you're saying don't shoot the messenger. I
Right.
mean,
Right.
it's-
But I do a lot of bereavement work. And because I'm a healer too, sometimes other mediums send people to me. I've had other mediums who do prefer to do more of like the haunted house thing, who have literally sent clients to me, because it was too deep of an emotional well, or because I do continued work with families. I help them. If somebody comes to me because, like, for example, they've lost a child, it might start as a spirit communication session. And then it might also move on to having some healing sessions. And usually during those healing sessions, once I've made contact with the spirit, that spirit's still going to come through for a few words at every healing session and help that person to move through their grief.
and grief can be so paralyzing.
Yes.
Make it so hard. Let's go into the suicide aspect of things
Mhm.
because I mean, I know my beliefs and my thoughts about suicide, which is not a judgment thing, but it just is a shortcut that you're going to have to come and do again.
Yeah.
That's how I look at suicide. Like, deal with what you can deal with now instead of
Mhm.
trying to take a shortcut because you're only going to have to come and have the same situation until you stop committing suicide. It's like a Groundhog Day until you can change your
Yeah.
beliefs. How does that work in your world, your beliefs, or the way you talk to people
So
about suicide?
first, I like to just rephrase committed suicide to died by suicide, because committed makes it sound like it's a crime. And
True.
somebody actually corrected me on that at one point, and it stuck with me because I wasn't meaning anything bad by saying it, but I think they're right. And when I have people who come to see me and I know that the soul has passed in that way, because I don't know until I start. I don't ask anybody anything really. I will say something like, um, they were partially responsible for their own passing, because whether it was suicide, accidental overdose, you know, organ failure from a lifetime of alcoholism, or accident at your own reckless speed, they all fall into my initial category, which means this person holds some responsibility for their passing. When a person dies with a lot of emotional trauma, so suicide, murder, just being, completely in a rough place, it's not only hard on the family, the soul does not go to hell. That's one of the things that most people come forward and they say, hey, I'm not in hell. And what happens is they get put into what I refer to as timeout, and it's a place of reflection. And we all, excuse me, we all go into this time of reflection. But when we have a lot of trauma around us at the time of death, our time of reflection is going to be a lot longer.
Yeah,
So,
I call it Bardo, but
yes, Bardo's a good word for it. I try to use really simple terms because I tell people that my clients are everybody. I have state troopers, or, like police officers, old ladies, waitresses, people who, are not metaphysically educated. And so in my writing and in my speaking, I always try to describe anything that I am using as a term, knowing that the average everyday person may not understand me. And so that's why I refer to things as timeout, or, and so that, because if I'm really trying to educate people as well as heal them, I want them to have a understanding that, like you said, death isn't the end. This is a transition. One of the interesting things that I think helps people a lot to understand is that when we pass, our emotions get turned down. So if we imagine our emotions on a volume dial of 0 to 10, most of us go through life with our emotions at about a 3 or a 4. And somebody who is struggling with depression or anxiety, mental illness of any kind, is likely to have their emotions coming through at like an 8 or a 9. And if you imagined having to go through your entire life with your music blaring at you all the time, it would make you go crazy. And that is the experience that a lot of people have. And so I think it's important to understand that when somebody does die from suicide, that they were already in hell. They
Yeah.
were already at a point where they could not function. Um, and there is some complications. I mean, sometimes people die from suicide and it was a medication, like I've experienced that, where somebody who was depressed, their medication was changed. And there's a lot of warnings on psychological medications that will tell you that it can spike your depression and you need to make sure you're in contact with your doctor. I highly, highly recommend that if somebody's had a prescription change with their mental health medication, that they have people in their family that know this and watch them for a couple of weeks, because
Yeah.
that unfortunately has been the case more than once.
I think that it happens quite often.
Yeah,
And then they find themselves being guided to kill themselves, even though it's not their guidance,
right.
it's the medication. And there's another gal who's a friend of mine who's been on the show, who that happened to her, where she was like this close and she called a friend who talked her down
Yeah.
because it's
And there are, hotlines. I did a radio show 2 days ago on Coast to Coast, and we had one of the callers actually told us that they had attempted suicide a couple weeks before. And I want to say that while the hosts were fabulous, they gave him my book for free. What was really amazing to me was the other people who called in afterwards. Almost all of them had something to say to that guy too, either giving him direction on where he could find help, or encouraging him, or saying, hey, I've been in this place before, kind of like what you said, you don't want to, opt out now. So yeah, it's a pretty intense thing. And our world is really, really challenging right now. So emotional problems are at an all-time high.
they're
Addiction is at an
amplified.
all-time high. They're amplified.
Yeah, because of the energies. So Cynthia is saying, my dad died, probably suicide, over 50 years ago, and I want to know if he has or hasn't reincarnated. I still talk to him daily, but I'm wondering. Thank you. If you choose to answer that, that
Yeah,
would be
sure, I
great.
can answer that. Cynthia, I would tell you that most likely your dad will be there until you cross. Okay. That doesn't mean he's still in timeout, and when somebody is in timeout, they still have contact with spirits that love them. They're just not becoming spirit guides or doing any kind of work like that, but they're often really around their family. So talking to him and healing yourself helps him to heal. And my feeling is that he'll probably be one of the spirits that are waiting for you when it's your time to cross, because you guys have unfinished business. You need to be healed around the fact that you lost him in that way.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Cynthia. So let's talk about, what is the gray?
So the gray is a term that my spirits gave to me early on to describe the place in which a person can no longer get better. So when somebody is actively dying. And somebody might also be in the gray if they have recently crossed into spirit and are confused. So maybe somebody who has passed by suicide, or in the case of my spirit guide, he died of malaria. And he talked about the fact that when he died, because he had been in and out of delusion, because he had been hallucinating at the end of his life, that he didn't know for a little bit that he was dead until his grandfather came to get him. So the gray is that in-between space. And I describe it a lot by describing pregnancy. So we know when death and birth are two ends of that circle, right? And in birth, we know that a child is going to be born because the mother's belly gets big. Pregnancy, here we go. When we're dying, we also start to show up more in the world of spirit. So they call it the gray because the dead start coming closer to them because they know that they're coming. Just like we gather around when a child is going to be born, our dead gather around when we've entered that stage of the gray.
That's a great way of putting it. When people have dementia or Alzheimer's,
Mm-hmm.
does that put them in a state of confusion while they're going in the gray or when they're on the other
Well, when
side?
they're in the gray and they're dying, they probably are still, showing their signs of dementia. But the hard part is for a lot of families, and this is where seeing a medium is really fun, is that a lot of times when somebody's in that delusional state, if they're getting close to death, whether they're delusional or not, they will likely start to talk about their dead, their dead wife, their dead husband, mother, child, whatever. And especially if somebody has dementia or Alzheimer's, we have a tendency to believe that that's just part of the illness. But I have had so many times when spirits have come through to me, and I'll say to the living family that's with me, I'll be like, okay, your mom is in the nursing home. And they're like, yes. And I was like, and they're like, how do you know? I said, because your dad is there with her. And they'll be like, oh my God, she keeps talking about my dad. I said, I know. He wants you to know that this is not part of her illness, that he's actually there. Okay. That happens whether we have mental illness or not, but it is a common thing for people when they're in the gray too, because they're closer to the world of spirit, for them not only to have visitation, but also for people who are taking care of them to have visitation.
So was this all in the spirit speaker?
Yeah,
This kind of
all of this
information?
information is in Spirit Speaker, A Medium's Guide to Death and Dying. I actually wrote Spirit Speaker. It's only a little over 100 pages. I wrote it small, or made it small, because I wanted it to be approachable to everybody. And I answer all of the questions I have been asked the most often in my 20 years as a psychic medium by my clients. So it answers what happens when we die, what's happening when we're dying, ways of helping people when they're dying to crossover, and as well as basic information on developing skills in mediumship and honoring your dead.
Wow. It sounds like such an amazing book. Now, is there also tips for deepening your connection with spirits on the others, your loved ones who are in spirit
Yes.
form in the book as
Yes,
well?
including altars and offerings, ways that spirits communicate with us. There's a whole section on signs and symbols and how spirits most often communicate. And I even explain like how that works, like what they're actually doing. Because a lot of times people will get, like, music is a big one. They'll be like, the song came on the radio and I knew it was my mom. And I'm like, yes, but the DJ had nothing to do with that. The spirit didn't make the DJ play the song. Instead, what happened was the song came on and your loved one was already with you, and they push their energy at you because they want you to feel them in connection to that song, because spirits are opportunistic. They don't cross over and have a handbook on how they can best communicate with their loved ones. They have to figure it out. And so they all try different things, but there are some regular things they try.
So it's a synchronicity of sorts. Would
Yes,
you
but they're definitely
say?
doing something.
Now, I love that. So Olivia is asking, what about if I've experienced multiple near-death experiences? How does that impact my spirituality?
Well, the near-death experience is not uncommon actually amongst real spiritual people. And not saying you have to have a near-death experience to be to have that, but a lot of spiritual practitioners have had near-death experiences, and that has connected them deeper to their spirituality. I almost drowned when I was 12, and while I had gifts before that, I do think that, I mean, I still go back to the space I almost drowned regularly, like as a spiritual place for myself. I have an amazing relationship with water, which created my book, The Path of Elemental Witchcraft, because my connection with spirit is not limited to just humans. And I think that near-death experiences open us. They expand our consciousness. And if you're having experiences you don't understand, Olivia, because of that, you may want to reach out. If you have a local teacher or healer around you, or you can reach out to me through my website and, see what you can do with that information.
Thank you so much. I hope that helps, Olivia. So I have a question. So there's the woman who founded Delphi University in Georgia, McKaysville. Her husband passed. She wrote this book, The Definitive Book of the Afterlife. And from her husband on the other side has collaborated with her on this
Yep.
book. And they talk about being able to plan to meet your loved one at a place that you both love. So, for example, if I loved a certain mountain like the Himalayas, and I said, okay, honey, if you go first, when it's my time, I'm going to meet you at that mountain, that place in the mountain in the
You're
Himalayas.
talking about when you both are
And
crossed into spirit?
right, when one
Yeah.
crosses first, and like when it's my turn, I'll meet you. We're going to meet there.
Mhm.
Do you agree that that can happen where you can make a
You
plan with a loved
certainly
one?
can, but I also don't think that if you don't have a plan that your loved ones are gonna ignore you. Okay? So I think that the plan is a great idea because it gets people connected to the idea that they can have a living relationship with their dead and make these plans, but I don't think it's necessary. So if somebody does not have a plan, your loved ones are still gonna come for you. It just might not feel like, because yes, you could go to the Himalayas, you can go anywhere, because I have a spirit, my husband's spirit guide, but I live in the same house and I'm a medium. So he was, one of his lives, he was a doctor in London during the Industrial Revolution, and his office is all wood. Everything is wood. And I know this because every time he talks to you, he brings you into his office and you can see all of the details of his office. Okay. So some spirits really like to create an environment. Some spirits like to be formless, and they don't necessarily want to be attached to a destination or a thing or anything. So it really is, there's a lot more. I do believe that what we think we're going to get for the afterlife can play a part into it, like what we imagine where we want to spend our time, just like my husband's guide being in his office. Okay, you can find those places. I also think, though, that when you're having a living relationship with your dead, that you want to choose a place that they really enjoyed to be the place that you have their altar. So, like if your mom loved to sit sit with coffee and talk in the kitchen, then an altar to her would be best served in the kitchen. Okay, so basically you're choosing a
Hmm.
place where they love to hang out. Your dad loved to hang out on the deck. Okay, I talked to my dad on the deck. Those kind of things help us to have that living relationship. We don't need to necessarily go to graveyards.
I find it always interesting that people go to the grave because that's where the body is, but the body is without soul, and they'll go to where the body is buried rather than communicate with the
But the
actual
body will know to
light
go
of
to the graveyard. So there is a benefit to it. The body, what happens is that
the spirit. You
your
mean
dead
no
are
spirit?
watching you. They're watching you. And when you make that trip to the graveyard, what you're doing is you are letting go of all of your everyday worries. You're telling yourself that you're going there with the purpose of communicating. You're not going there to weed. You're not going there to, go over your bills. You're not going there with those worries. You might have some worries, but they're the serious ones that you would bring to your family member. And so when you enter that place, the reason why gravestones are powerful is because it's a connecting point. But you can have that same connecting point in the comfort of your home by building an altar, which it can simply be a shelf that you put pictures and mementos on. Excuse me. Spring is starting here, so that means my
Yeah.
allergies are too. But so you can do the same kind of thing. An altar, a family altar, which I do write about in Spirit Speaker, is a great way of, bringing that sacred space into your home.
Could you share for people who don't know how to create an altar, what kind of items that one would put on there to honor the family?
So people might put pictures of their loved one, maybe a religious symbol if your parent or partner or child was really religious. If your brother loved baseball, you might put a baseball on your altar, crystals, seashells from the ocean, especially if your family really loved going to the ocean. If your mother was a cook, you might want to put her favorite spoon on your altar. You also may want to leave temporary offerings, which can be things like, it could be things like, you know, tobacco or their
Piece of
favorite
chocolate or
cookie,
something?
chocolate, tea. Now, those things when you put on their altar are only going to be energetically appreciated. So you do need to clean them off because they'll go bad. The spirit isn't
Hmm.
actually going to eat the chocolate bar, but they have what I call food memories. We love food, we love drink, we love smoke, we love those simple digestibles, okay? And so as the dead, we remember those things, we remember, and especially what I've noticed is when I do spirit communication for people from the after Halloween through the new year. Because of the holidays, people talk about their favorite food so much. And I mean, sometimes it's really specific. I've had people like literally, I'm like, okay, your wife really loved Almond Joy candy bars. And there was usually one in her pocket. And people will be like, how did you even know what kind it was? I was like, because she's showing me an Almond Joy candy bar and I know what it looks like. But if your relative is, maybe from Greece, I will be able to hear them, but I will know that that English isn't their regular language. And I might know they have candy, but I probably wouldn't be able to identify
What
what
kind?
type it is. As a medium, you have to become like, I watch a lot of history because I've been lectured by spirits because I didn't know that they were in Korea, not Vietnam. So I try to educate myself.
I bet they can be pretty amusing on the other
Oh,
side with
they
what
really
they
are.
come back with.
They are. And if your spirits are sarcastic, you're going to get some sarcastic things in your spirit communication. If your family member was a joker, they're going to be funny. You're going to laugh. You're going to cry. You're going to have a full experience because this is really your relative. So, like, don't expect Uncle Bob to be somber if he was always playful.
Well, and if it came through you as being super somber, you'd probably go, that doesn't sound like him.
Exactly. It's funny, but it's like, so I personally like to swear, but so do a lot of people. And
Hmm.
sometimes I'll have a spirit come through and I'll stop and I'll be like, look, your dad really liked to swear. And they will start laughing and I'll say, so I'm just going to talk like he would. And I'll allow myself. That's why I always say I have to put myself back on some shows because it's like it's not appropriate. But when it's a person one-on-one, if your relative was somebody who, said things in a certain way, I really try to bring their style of communication through because that's what feels authentic. That and the weird things they talk about.
So, can you share like one of the most memorable exchanges that you've had?
I've had so many.
But
I'll
there's
talk
got to
about
be.
Yeah, well, I'll talk about my first one because I think this is helpful to anybody who is working on developing their own ability to receive information. Okay. I tell my students, leave out the words maybe, kind of, and think so, because we doubt ourselves so much. And if we spent half as much time believing as we did doubting, we would start experiencing miracles every day. So the first official seance I ever did, I had a family come, and all of the information I was giving them was accurate and they were happy with it. And I was speaking to a grandfather at the time, and he kept showing me a giant rooster. And I was like, I cannot tell these people that I'm seeing a giant rooster. This has to be my imagination. But finally, I was like, look, he keeps showing me a giant rooster. I know it's probably nothing. And the whole family started laughing and told me that their grandfather had a giant metal rooster statue in his front yard. Okay. It ended up being the most important piece of information that was given, because out of everything else, it was something that you couldn't make up or say. That's why I also won't let spirits start with talking about how much they love somebody. I think that's kind of unfair to the living person. It's like, give me some meat and potatoes before we have the cake. Okay.
Dessert.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that rooster ended up being the most important piece of confirmation. And so I try to really remind people that when we're getting these things that we're like, oh, that can't be anything, you might be wrong. You probably are wrong. You're probably, and also when you are actually wrong in what you're getting, instead of seeing yourself as a failure, try to figure out how you were wrong, because it's hard. In some ways, it's kind of like playing a sophisticated game of charades.
Yeah. I I understand that. And so, do you have any suggestions on how somebody can talk to their beloved one on the other side to get them to respond in some way to let them know that they're there or whatever it might be?
Sure. My suggestion would be to set up an altar or a regular place in which you enact, you spend time with your beloved dead. I'd also recommend that you get something like a tea light candle and you light it on your altar and spend about 5 minutes there every day trying to really be connected. And that you leave out words like maybe, kind of, and think so. Because if you say, like, I thought I saw something out of the corner of my eye, it's like, okay, let's rephrase that. I saw something out of the corner of my eye. Almost every time I have people do that, they go, oh, and I'm like, so how's that feel? And they're like, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. So try taking the word out and rephrasing it. Also, know that spirit communication is not only the skill of the spirit, I mean, of the person, the medium, or the family member, it's also the skill of the medium. So your relative who was a good communicator is probably going to be easier to communicate with in death. And the family member who loved you but didn't hardly ever talk, don't expect them to be really talkative. You might feel them. They might show you some images in your mind that remind you of them, but chances are they're not going to suddenly be having a dialogue with you. And I think that saying thank you in their name when you do have an experience. So I think I saw my mom out of the corner of my eye. Hi, mom, I know it's you. She's going to repeat that action because she knows it got through to you. Because spirit communication is in some ways like, or the veil between worlds is sometimes like a police mirror in which the spirits are on the side that they can see us, hear us clearly. And the living are on the side where they sometimes know something's over there, but they can't always see it. And a medium is a person who can go between the rooms and say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. This is what they're saying.
I love that definition. It's so digestible to be able to explain to someone how the process is. I mean, that's totally brilliant. So thank you. I need to take a break because it's charity shout out
Sure.
time. And your charity is VT Food Bank, VT for
Yep.
Vermont, foodbank.org, give-money. So let's talk about the food bank. I mean,
Yeah.
I think food banks are so important.
Yeah. So I am a very big community builder. This is something that people are a little bit surprised by. I was on a school board for 9 years. I am very involved in whatever community I'm a part of. And I know that housing and food shortages are a problem for a lot of people. The state of Vermont right now has the highest per capita homeless rate, even though we have the most
Oh,
of our homeless housed, but they are still homeless. They're just in shelters. And I have a lot of friends who run things that have to do with providing food and, needs met for people. The Vermont Food Bank is a wonderful resource, and it directly goes into feeding the people who are the most needs, whether they go there themselves, but it also provides food for a lot of the smaller community businesses that run food shelves and pantries. So this is a direct to the people kind of charity.
I love that. I'm in the process of packing my house up, and I've gone through my
Food. Yeah,
cabinets, and I've got bags of food that I need to get over to a food bank because, instead of just tossing
yeah,
them, people can use them. They just can't be expired. They could be
exactly.
close to expiration, but not expired. And they could use it. What one person, and I don't want to use the word garbage, but what somebody can't eat anymore is a feast to somebody else.
Exactly.
How
In
would you
my
treat that
local
one?
area, they have, like, on Facebook, and this might be for a lot of things, there's also usually a service that's like, buy nothing, like the buy not there's usually buy nothing pages that people can look into. And, like, I'm on that, and I saw the other day that somebody was just put out that they had a frozen turkey they weren't gonna eat, and they had 6 people respond within the first 5 minutes and saying how much this would help them, either because they had a family or they were living on a fixed income. And so, yeah, don't throw your stuff away. There are people who need what you might not need anymore.
Yeah, because life changes. I mean, one day I'm eating everything, and next minute I'm gluten-free,
Oh, I hear
dairy-free,
you.
blah, 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 blah. And it's like all this stuff because I hate to say it, but I sort of get my husband to follow my trend of eating unless we're eating out.
Right,
Then God bless, go with God. Eat what you want, I'll eat what I can, and
right.
we'll both be happy.
Yes.
That's something I get. Thank you so much. So everyone, you can find vtfoodbank.org on the blog, along with all of Sally Crow's information, her website, her Instagram profile, etc., so that you can check her out. And please make sure you just go to the blog when the show's done. So thank you. All right. So let's talk about honoring and anointing the dead. Now, is that what you were referring to when you were talking about what to do at the altar, or is this a
This is
different step
different.
too?
So
Okay.
honoring and anointing the dead has to do with taking care of our own dead, because this is a book on death and dying. I have also I'm a guest speaker at a regular stardustmeadows.org is a death doula educational center. So for people who want to work at the end of life, whether they're with their own families or as a profession. And I am it's a 13-week course. I'm usually the 13th week they bring in a medium. But I've also, before this even existed, before there was like death doula coaching, which even Champlain College, I think, in Vermont offers a course as well. Um, Before this even happened, my sister and I found ourselves in this position a lot, where if somebody was dying, whether it was a family member or friend's family member, that we may, or even through Reiki. I've actually done mouth to mouth resuscitation on one of my Reiki clients who was dying of cancer until um, the ambulance got there. So I've been involved with the Death and Dying, or Death with Dignity Act in the state of Vermont, in which you know, one of my druid friends was the third person in the state to use the assisted suicide for terminal illness. She had cancer throughout her body. So I've been involved deeply in the death process as well. And when I talk about anointing and honoring, I'm talking about the fact that for a lot of people, the sterile hospital setting of death doesn't work. And even in that sterile setting, if that's what you have to do, you still have rights. You have rights to clean the body of your dead if you choose to. And you have rights, and you can ask at any hospital, and if they tell you no, tell them that this is part of your spiritual practice, and they will go get you water and washcloths and help you with that. Most hospitals are going to be really good anyways, but knowing that you do have rights around it. But so traditionally, it's only been in the last 50 years really that we stopped taking care of our own dead, like as a mass. And in many ways, that affects our ability to grieve because, when you were the one who was standing vigil with your loved one after their death, or touching their body, washing them, anointing them, treating them as sacred and holy, you got to have a closure that you'd never have in any other way. Excuse me. And it's also very much an honoring for the person. You can do this with simple soap and water, maybe their perfumes or colognes that they liked to use. I have a whole section on this in the book, The Path of Elemental, not The Path of Elemental Witchcraft. That was last book, Spirit Speaker. So the honoring and anointing really comes down to how we treat the actual act of death. That instead of seeing it as something that we want to see happen behind closed doors, that only really happened when we started homogenizing death in the 1950s and, along with everything else. This is what it means to be an American. We're showing you through the television what this means to be an American. But the reality of it is that most Americans carry some other kind of ethnic family background that provided our traditions for us up until that point. Okay. And in
Yeah.
those traditional backgrounds, there was great care around what we did around death and dying. And that all got erased when we programmed into America that, that death should be something that we, 2 weeks of casseroles, a wake, and a funeral, and everybody's ready to move on. But nobody's ready to move on in 2 weeks. And nobody really feels like there was closure because they didn't touch the body. They didn't, have those moments of sacredness with their loved ones.
It's so interesting because in the Jewish religion, right before the ceremony, the family will see the open casket, but the family, the friends, and the other family members outside the immediate don't have that
Right.
opportunity. And it makes a
It
difference as
does.
well, I really
It
believe.
does. I'm Irish in a traditional, the last time I was in Ireland, I actually stayed with some family that we're close to that one of the uncles or the brothers had a pub that had been in his family since the 1500s. He was also an undertaker. And he said that while it is a dying out fashion in Ireland now, there are a lot of old bartenders who are also undertakers because the ceremony was actually done. My family have all had Irish wakes or funerals in which it's a celebration of life. Stories are told, drinks are drank, there's very, very much a ability to have some of that closure because you're celebrating the person that you love, and you have that through your Jewish heritage. But some people don't have any contact with that, and we can bring that back for ourselves by these things that do make it more sacred.
I love the idea, and we only have a minute left, but I love the idea of celebrating the person who's transitioning or who has transitioned rather than making it a crying, solemn, sad event.
Tears
And
will come whether you're celebrating or not, but it's a lot more healing if it's an environment that allows us to laugh and cry and sing and tell stories and remember the antics of the person who was dying. Because if they were really a goofy person, that's part of the reason you love them. If they could be a real, smart ass, well, that's what you accept about. You know what I mean? These are part of who they are.
exactly.
And we need to be able to bring that back into the death process.
I love that. And I hope that the people who are listening to this are meant to listen to this and that they will get your book, The Spirit Speaker, and learn about that death is not a scary thing. Death is not a negative thing. Death is a part of living. And being on the other side and guiding people from that other side is also a part of the process.
Yes,
It's it's nothing to be afraid
it
of.
is nothing to be afraid of. And for people
And
who are looking to, go deeper into that, I do recommend mediumship as part of your healing process, not just with me. If you know other good mediums in your area, there is something that's really healing on being able to make a genuine connection with your spirit, because even if you can't have that on your own because it's not part of who you are, then working with a medium can help you to establish that to some degree. And it can also help you to heal and to close up that part of you that's still raw, because when we think that the person we love is just gone, that's really heartbreaking.
it's true. It's absolutely true. Well, Salicrow, Sally, thank you so much for all you've shared, for answering our listeners' questions. I just find it phenomenal. And please, everyone out there, check out the Spirit Speaker, because I think it will certainly give you a new perspective on what death is about and transitioning, and that it's not a horrible thing, and that if people come to you, they're coming to you for a reason.
Yes.
So thank you so much. I appreciate you so much for being here and all you've
Thank you for
given
having
us
me,
today.
Marla.
So, and I want to thank Bridget, my right hand, my left hand. So grateful for everything you do for me. For you, the listening audience, thank you so much for coming up and being a part of this show, because this show is done from you, from my heart to yours. So thank you. Also, next week's guest is Milagros McGowan, spiritual hypnotist, healer, and medium. So tune in next week as we have another amazing show for you. Check out my website at Marla Goldberg. Goldberg has 2Rs.com, and see what I do and how I can work with you and help you in your transition, in your life's process. And as I leave you, well, first of all, I'm going to say once again, to those who celebrate and observe, happy Passover, happy Easter, and happy Ramadan. May each of your celebrations be all, excuse me, now it's my turn. In North Carolina, allergies,
Colin's
not a pollen.
probably already at it.
So, but for whatever you celebrate and observe, or if you don't, just have a great weekend. Well, I apologize for the coughing fit. It is allergy season. Um, so thank you. And as I leave you, as always, I leave you by sending you love, blessings, and gratitude. Grateful that you're in my life in whatever capacity you're in it. For not only are you my student, you're my teacher. Not only am I a teacher, I am a student. And if I'm going to say these three words to you in 1 second. Oh my God, Spirit, this is not funny. Because it's just at this ending. But know that I love you. And not only are you loved by me, your family, and your friends, but you have your whole contingency on the other side of the veil who love you as well and who are your biggest cheerleaders. And I guess this is perfect for you too, Sally. And that want to conspire on your behalf, but you need to ask them, because tell me if I'm wrong, they don't have free will. So you need to ask for what you need, want, desire, so they can start working on your behalf to bring them to you. And please be open to how it comes to you, because it's not linear. It's not going to just be dropped in your lap. Sometimes you have to read between the lines on things that you're experiencing to know that it's coming from your loved ones. Would you agree with this?
Yeah, I think you have to, like, don't hold out for that one message that you think is gonna prove that your mom is there. if they're giving you a bunch of other information that you know is about them, because they might not be able to give you that one piece you're holding out for. So, open your heart, have a little bit of trust in your experience.
Oh, thank you for bringing that in as well, Sally. All right. Well, have a wonderful, beautiful week and weekend, and I will see you next week. Stay well and take care.